Everyone, are we having fun? Welcome back. Yeah, welcome back to Kids Week at the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum, and also welcome back to those of you who are joining us at home. So excited to be here again, right? So everyone, as we promised, we have a very, very special, super exciting thing in store for you now. Who here loves space? Anyone? Yeah? All right. Who here would like to live in space? Yeah, pretty exciting. All right. Well, everyone, I am so excited to announce that we have not one, but actually two very special people here in the building today who did just that. All right. So I am so thrilled now to welcome to the stage none other than the Intrepid Museum's very own Senior Advisor for Space Programs and former NASA astronaut himself, Mr. Mike Massimino. And he is going to help us to introduce our very special guest today. So welcome aboard.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much for coming. I'm Mike. I am a former NASA astronaut. I was an astronaut in 1996. I was picked, and I left NASA around 2013, 2014, when the person I'm going to introduce now was just joining NASA. So it's my pleasure to introduce Victor Glover. He is a very accomplished person, an engineer with a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in engineering. He's also a naval aviator. He's flown on and off of aircraft carriers, the modern version of the Intrepid Museum that we're right now. The modern version of those carriers. Combat became a test pilot, which is a very difficult thing to do. Only the best pilots get a chance to do something like that. And then he became an astronaut. And as I was leaving NASA, Victor and his astronaut class were coming into NASA, and I got to meet them briefly and thought, what are they going to be doing in the years to come? And they've done quite a lot. Victor was on the very first operational mission of the SpaceX Dragon spaceship. He was the pilot for that mission, flew up to the space station, lived in space for about 6 months, did 4 spacewalks and lots of other great things. But I think most importantly, once he gets up there, you're going to realize he's a really cool guy and a really good guy, very gregarious, outgoing, loves to share his experience. We're very, very lucky to have him here. His wife's here somewhere. I don't want to embarrass her, but he's a family man. He's got 4 kids, which I think is the real adventure. But we're really lucky to have him here. I'm very, very happy that he's here. It's my honor to introduce him. So let's get Victor up here with a nice round of applause.
Thank you, sir.
Go get him.
Good afternoon. It's great to see you. Welcome to Kids Week in the Intrepid. How great is it to be doing this in person? Can we get a round of applause for the staff and all the folks making it possible to have this in person again after, 2 years? 2 years of doing it virtually? So great. Listen, I got a lot of things I want to show you and share with you and stories to relay to you. And so without further ado, I'm gonna jump right in and get going, because my favorite part is when I'm done with all this stuff, I get to ask questions and answer your questions and talk to you about what you want to talk about. So be thinking of those questions now, because I'm counting on you, right? And if you don't have questions, I'm going to have questions for you. There will be a test at the end, okay? All right? Okay, with that, let's get going. So I usually start by asking the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be? Do you know? Just do me a favor. If you know what you want to be when you grow up, raise your hand. Raise your hand. And look, it's only the kids. Like, the grown-ups are not raising their hand, but some of you haven't figured it out yet either. So let's be honest. If you know what you want to be when you grow up, raise your hand. Like, I haven't quite figured it out yet. But, I ask this question a lot, and I get one consistent answer, and I'm going to share this with you. I hear a lot of kids say, I don't know. Or maybe they thought they did and they don't now, the more they learn. But I want to encourage you with this. I'm not joking when I tell you, I don't really know what I want to be when I grow up, even though I may be already there, but that's okay. But there are some things you can focus on being, and I'm going to tell you that right up front. And if you do these things, not only, being successful is relative. These things will help you have a good definition of what success means, and it will help you achieve whatever that success is for you. So I'm going to share those with you. Number 1, be resilient. Number 2, be a lifelong learner. And number 3, being a good teammate. So I'm going to tell you some stories about my journey to NASA, and then my journey to space, and back down to Earth safe. And throughout the process, if you can remember those things and see where they apply, maybe bring it down one notch. And if you can see where those things apply, I'm going to share my stories. But my point in sharing these stories with you is to see how they relate to you. That's really the point. I'm really talking to the kids. Parents, you're just here because they need a ride. A lot of these kids don't drive yet. I'm talking to the kids, okay? So I'm going to start off with just my background. I'm from California, Southern California, big family, lots of cousins. This is me with my cousins, and I love to show these. Oh, I went too fast. Sorry. I start with that one and ask you if you can pick out which one is me. And it's kind of a trick question because back then I had hair, and that's why I love showing these pictures. That's me in my Easter suit, because I had hair. Okay, moving forward, I tell some stories about teachers in my background who were really influential and had a lot to do with where I wound up today. One teacher in particular in 5th grade, Mr. Hargrove, he was my science teacher, and he was also our advisor for a program called MESA, Mathematics, Engineering, and Science Achievement. And he also noticed that I really liked math, and I was pretty okay at it. And he told me one day, he said, you know, Victor, if you work really hard at this math and all your stuff in school, one day you might make a great engineer. And I didn't know what an engineer was. Did you see what just went by on the screen there? It was supposed to make some noise. Let me make sure my volume is up. But I didn't know that an engineer designed things and came up with technical solutions to humanity's problems. I thought it meant driving trains. But Mr. Hargrove believed in me so much that I thought, well, I'm going to take my math and I'm going to go drive trains. I also had a teacher in high school, my math teacher, Mr. Gerald Robinson. I was in his classroom one day working on a problem. Those are my friends. I just love showing these pictures because, again, that's back when I had hair. But I was in his classroom working on a problem. We were given adding numbers in a series. So adding up the numbers from 1 to 10. Not super hard, but I noticed a pattern. If I drew them in a shape, what shape does that look like to you? Triangle, a triangle. If I put the numbers in that shape, I could actually do a math problem where it would add up every time. I found a pattern, I could multiply length times width divided by 2. That's how you find the area of a triangle. But I found a pattern for adding up those numbers, and I couldn't wait to tell my teacher. And when I got to class and told it to him, he turned some pages in the book and said, look at that. It's right there in the book. And I was kind of like, oh man, I had a name for it and everything, the Gloverian theorem. I was excited. But he did something that changed my life. He said, you know what, Victor, you figured that out on your own. Why don't you teach that to your classmates? One day in high school, my math teacher let me show something to my other classmates. And someone who had not had a parent or grandparent go to college, that was a huge day for me. That was the beginning of believing that maybe I could go to college and be successful, even though I don't have anybody in my immediate family who had done so. That was a huge day for me. I actually would graduate high school and go on to college. I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and I was super involved in clubs. I played sports. I went on a wrestling scholarship. I love football, so I even walked out for the football team. I was kind of busy. I was a little bit busy in college. I actually love to talk to kids about math and science. And so that program that I was in 5th grade, I went back and was a tutor for that program. And this is actually a picture of my girlfriend and I talking to students about how to build bridges or make cars powered by mousetraps. Hands-on learning, like what you're here to do at Kids Week. And that girlfriend would become my wife, Deanna. And we were together teaching these kids how to do these things and how to apply science and math to real-world problems. And I love that. That was one of my favorite parts about college. And I graduated from college, and the combination of sports and engineering, what I was learning on the field and the mat and in the classroom and the laboratory, would combine for me in wanting to go off and do something professionally that was a little more exciting than just being at a drafting table. Design was important, but I wanted to put what I learned into practice. I wanted to use these in conjunction with this. And so I would join the Navy. I was commissioned in 1999. I went to flight school, earned my wings in 2001. That's my dad pinning my wings on. That's a very special day. And I got to go learn to fly the F-18 in San Diego with a good class of Marines there. And then I flew out of Virginia Beach. My very first squadron was VFA 34 in Virginia Beach. I flew in combat, Operation Iraqi Freedom. That is a really amazing, to take one of these and do what it's meant to do. We left the East Coast and steamed across the Atlantic, through the channels and into the Northern Arabian Gulf, and flew missions into Iraq for 6 months. And what an exercise in teamwork and communication and leadership. But anyway, it was a great opportunity to learn more about that machine, flying the F-18. And then when I finished flying off of a carrier, I had the fortune to go, as Mike mentioned, to test pilot school and really learn the inner workings of flying and what small changes to the airplane could mean for how you use that system. And I also had the opportunity while I was a test pilot to go to college. I went back to college to, again, combine what I was learning in the airplane with what I would learn in the classroom to make myself a more effective engineer and pilot and test pilot. And so I had the opportunity to go to the Naval Postgraduate School up in Monterey and graduate with a master's degree. And then after going to school again, my family and I would move across the Pacific to Japan. And we lived in Japan for 2 years. And I was stationed there where the airplanes were. And then we had a carrier not far. And we would deploy from Japan and go on deployments from there. And this picture is very special. In that tour, we went from flying the F-18 Hornet, which I think there's one up there, great airplane, to flying the Super Hornet. A Hornet that's about the size of a Tomcat, which I think there's one of those up there too. And a friend of mine took this picture. This is me landing on the George Washington. And what I didn't know at the time was this would actually be my last time landing on an aircraft carrier. I'd left this squadron and my family moved again across the ocean and across most of the country. And we went to Washington, D.C. And I got to work in a really cool place. Any of you ever been to Washington, D.C., to the Capitol? Have you been to the U.S. Capitol? I got to work in the Capitol, going to the Capitol 5 days a week. And I worked on this gentleman's staff. Actually, both of these two heroes and personal mentors and friends of mine are no longer alive. That's Senator John McCain, and this is Congressman John Lewis. And both of them were so gracious to me during the time I was working on Capitol Hill, and neither one of them is with us any longer. So those are very special moments that I get to share. But I worked in Congress on the staff of John McCain, and I was doing that job, not wearing a flight suit or a military uniform, but regular clothes to work. And then I get this very special phone call. Do you come to NASA to start astronaut training? And there's only one answer to that. What do you think I said? Yeah. And so I would move to Houston to go start astronaut candidate training. And to be an astronaut, you study 5 basic things and then a whole bunch of other stuff. If you like school, this is a great job for you. You get to study everything. But these are the main things that you got to know to astronaut. That says, my name is Victor. Меня зовут Victor. Я говорю по-русски немного. I speak a little bit of Russian because half of the space station is made by Russian aerospace companies. And so we have to learn how to read procedures because we also fly in a Soyuz, which is a Russian spacecraft. And some of us get to be the co-pilot of that Russian spacecraft. So we all learn Russian. We all learn International Space Station systems. It's a big, complex machine, just like this aircraft carrier. And I had to learn the systems of an aircraft carrier and actually drive one of these out on the ocean to get a qualification squadron. And I found that it was a very similar type of training. You have to break it down into small pieces because you only got limited space up there. And so having to learn it bit by bit, we learn how to fix things because this is my classmate, Drew Morgan, and we're fixing the telephone on the space station. Well, this is training to do it. But he's an Army physician and I'm a Navy pilot. But on that day, we were both training to be telephone repair guys. Very cool. I love that. You get to do all kinds of stuff. And while I was on the space station, I was a crew medical officer. So I got to pretend to be a doctor on the space station. We also have to learn to fly the robotic arm. We use it to make repairs, but we also can move our crew members around when they're outside on spacewalks. And flying, we say fly the robotic arm because it's actually like the stick and throttle of an airplane. And so you have to learn how to fly and type and communicate. It's very similar to flying in aircraft. We also get to do this really special thing in learning how to do spacewalks. We call them EVAs, extravehicular activity, but we learn to spacewalk. And in all of these pictures, what I love about all these shots is you'll never see me by myself. And you're probably thinking, well, no, he must not look at that. But if you see down here in the corner, those 2 underwater black things down there in the corner, those are my safety divers and a camera that are watching me every step of the way to make sure that we're safe. There's somebody within arms reaching me the entire time, and I'm underwater for 6.5 hours when we're training in that 6.2 million gallons of beautiful water. And it's because this is very much a team sport. Like everything in human spaceflight, spacewalk really emphasizes how much of a team sport it is. And this is a video of us getting dressed. This is just putting on our clothing to go out in the water and do the spacewalk. Very similar to what it's like in space. It takes a cast of 20 or 30 people, and it takes about 20 minutes to get us in the suit and into the water just to get started doing the work. Well, in space, we have less people. So 1 or 2 people do all that work to get 2 crew members suited up to go out the door on a spacewalk. Team sport. And then my favorite part of the 5 things you have to do is flying high-performance aircraft. All astronauts are qualified in the T-38, and we fly the T-38 because it's a place to practice making good decisions, teamwork, hand-eye coordination, talking to people that you can't see, which are all important things that we do when we're on the International Space Station. Great training platform. And once you graduate from astronaut candidate training, I like to say that we get to be ambassadors of the NASA vision. We share this vision of reaching for new heights and revealing the unknown for the benefit of humankind. And I love this picture because it really emphasizes that. Anybody recognize this picture? If you know what this picture is, raise your hand. What are those a picture of? What is that? Shout it out if you know it. I did hear it. Somebody said Pluto. That's Pluto and its moon Charon. These are the first high-resolution images of Pluto taken by the New Horizons mission. That spacecraft flew 9 years to take that picture. And before that, humankind did not have high-resolution images. We've got even better ones now, but that's the first one. And that's what NASA does. We open up the cosmos for us here on Earth. And this is also a really special picture to me because it was taken on the same day that my class graduated from astronaut candidate training, July 8th, 2015. Fast forward, that's my class, the 8 balls, 8 of us. The first time NASA selected a group of astronauts that was half men and half women. I think it's really important for us to represent the country that we get to serve. And so that's my class. We graduated in 2015. And fast forward, I'm going to skip the video. I love that video, and I hope if you ask questions, I may come back to it. But 3 years later, I get assigned to be a part of the commercial crew program's group of astronauts that are going to fly on the Boeing Starliner or the SpaceX Crew Dragon, and that's a whole bunch of us. But on the very end over there, right in front of that SpaceX spacesuit, is my commander, Mike Hopkins, and myself. And at the time, we didn't know which mission exactly we were going to go on, but it would wind up being the first operational mission of the SpaceX Crew Dragon, the second crewed mission. These 2 gentlemen, Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, would fly the first mission to the space station for a short test mission. We got to launch on May 2nd. I'm sorry, on November 15th. On November 15th, we walked out to the spacecraft in the daytime, and then we strapped in as the sun set, and we launched this beautiful night launch to the International Space Station. And we had the challenge, the extra challenge of training while the pandemic was going on. All of you have masks on, and you understand how important hygiene is. Well, right when that started, we had to keep training. And in order to do so safely, our training team had to find ways to keep us safe, but also all the people that we work with. And so we decided to name our spacecraft Resilient, to inspire people to grow through these challenges. And that's us walking out there, like I said, at the daytime. That's not a simulation, that's launch day. And we walk out into the crew access arm, they strap us in, and now it's real. The rocket is full of LOX, liquid oxygen and kerosene, and those engines light, 3, 2, 1, 0, they light, and we turn nighttime into daytime. And do we have sound? I really want to hear this part. Dude, do you know if we can make sound? Because I really wanted to. So one of the things that you heard him say as we launched up is not even gravity can hold us down when we explore space together. All for one, crew one for all. That was our saying, our mission, crew one. We would say all for one, crew one for all. And we would launch on November 15th, and we chased down the space station for 1 day, 27 hours. And 1 day later, we docked to the front of the space station, node 2 forward, which is the front of the space station. And then we would go inside to meet our crewmates, Kate Rubins and Sergei, 2 Russian cosmonauts. And the 7 of us would live together on space station for several months in that amazing castle in the sky called the International Space Station. Show you a couple of other highlights. The science facilities on board the station are amazing. We get to work with robots, plants,
life sciences, but we also have experiments that are run on us.
Even simple things like burning materials, it works differently in space when you take away gravity. studying how the muscles on those worms change by watching how they move through that maze. Lots of plant activities. We had lots of green thumbs, lots of people who love to grow things. A fluid dynamics experiment. Lots of amazing science. Cargo vehicles that bring up the food, clothing, but also new science experiments and new hardware. Just an overview of all the different facilities that we get to work with. You hear that? You hear it? You guys can't hear that in the back? Okay. Let's fix that for later. If we can play this audio through the same audio that I'm talking later, that was good. What I was talking about was all that great science experiment, all the facilities and the experience that we do. The primary experiment is the human being, and the connection that we have to each other will always make the human being that to space one of the most important things that we care about. And so that human aspect of human space flight will always be important. That's roughly what I said in the end there. But science and cargo vehicles, a huge part of what we do. Logistics is one of the most challenging aspects of space. And then spacewalks. I showed you earlier the training on the ground. Well, in space, you don't have as many people up there. So everybody, it takes the entire crew on a spacewalk day. And now you see Shannon getting the suits ready, putting water in the cooling garment, and getting the cameras. We put new high definition cameras on all of our spacesuit helmets. And this is Kate Rubins and Soichi Noguchi putting Mike Hopkins and I into the crew lock, which we're going to suck all the air out of and get it down to vacuum so that we can open the door and go out into space. And one question I always get is people ask me, what was your first spacewalk like? It was busy and hard. That's how it was like. And you'll see the actual view that I saw when I first went out. But I wasn't looking at what the camera sees. When we open the door, that's what you see outside the hatch. But I was looking at my hands because that I knew. Even though this was so different than what the training on the ground was like, that was the same. That handrail was in the same place. So I stuck to the basics and went with what I know. And for the first several hours, I was just focused on the thing that was right in front of me and not messing it up. Mike, is that true? Back when you trained for spacewalks, was not messing it up one of the most important things you did? So spacewalks were great. They were very busy, though. We had the luxury of having a lot of experienced folks up there that I could ask questions because this was my first mission. So that first spacewalk was my first time. I got on the robotic arm. We installed an antenna. And then as we were installing the cables for that antenna, one of them wouldn't go. It got stuck. And that was actually right when the sun set. I'm going to stop that. When the sun set, I couldn't get that plug in. The ground took some time to talk it over. And that was actually the first time I had an opportunity to look around. What I had not done for several hours before, I had a chance to look around and see. And it was right as the sun came up. And it was the most spectacular view. Living on the International Space Station, living on ISS, this is what I truly miss. I don't really miss space. I miss living with them in space. Being with the 7, at one point we had 11 people on the space station, and just being together, we had lots of fun. We love to have fun. We were working very hard, but when we had time, we liked to be together, and we had fun. This was us treating Node 1, where we eat lunch and dinner and breakfast. We were treating it like a traffic circle. It's what connects the Russian segment to the U.S. orbital segment, right in the middle. And so we like to have fun. This is Soichi showing you how fluids behave in weightlessness. Water, any fluid, is pretty cool when you get to see it in weightlessness. And this is us having some fun doing the Mannequin Challenge. If you've ever heard of the Mannequin Challenge, we got this on the first take. I like to brag. But this is us showing you kind of an action or a still image of what we could be doing, taking pictures, doing science on the space station. So just some highlights of what life is like. One of my favorite things that we did while I was up there was eating together. Meals together around the table, floating food to each other, sharing things. It was that, to me, is the part that I really miss the most. I did love exercising on the space station too. Exercising in space is very important to help us maintain our muscle mass, but also our bone density. We lose bone density because we're not standing up and supporting our weight. So we have to work out really hard to encourage our bones to continue to grow. Most of us still lose bone mass though, but this is one of the areas where we've actually helped out on the ground. There's this condition on the ground called osteoporosis. But when we go to space, we get space-induced osteoporosis. It's called osteopenia. So we reduce our salt and we lift weights to try to minimize our bone loss. And that's the same thing. That works down here on Earth as well. We happened to be there. So I said we launched November 15th. We landed on May 2nd. So we were up there during all the holidays. Christmas, New Year. We celebrated the Russian Orthodox New Year. We had 2 Russian cosmonauts, a Japanese astronaut. Later in the mission, a French astronaut and another Japanese astronaut would join us. And we celebrated all the holidays from all of those different cultures. And like I said, those people, being with them on the space station is one of the things that I miss the most. All right. And then it was time to go home. Back to Earth, back to all those people that we love. And I'm going to fast forward through this one so we can get right into the question and answer period. But we left. First thing we did was we practiced leaving by undocking from the front of space station where we originally parked, and we reparked our spaceship on the top of the space station to make room for Crew 2 to come up, the next operational mission of the Crew Dragon. And they showed up. We handed over the keys to space station, literally gave them the keys, and then we bugged out and went home. And I'm going to stop the video there. I'll play it again later in the Q&A. But we landed on May 2nd, and it got me back to the things that I love most, my family and friends. And this picture to me is just, it's a chance for me to give honor. I can't tell you all these people, but these are all people who helped me realize my of going to space. These are all really important, special people, but the main ones in the middle there are my wife, Deanna, and my daughters who have been with me on this adventure as long as we've been having this adventure. And so I got back home to them, what matters most to me. And that's looking back. This is looking forward. I would love to show you this video too, but I'm going to stop here because I've been talking way too much, and I want to answer your questions. So remember, I told you some stories about the things that I've gone through in my journey getting to space and back to Earth. But I really want you to think about how those things might relate to you or something that you may have gone through. And now, I told you in the very beginning, no matter what you want to be, it doesn't matter if you want to be an astronaut, a mommy, daddy, a scientist, a pilot, or a tour guide here at this beautiful Intrepid Museum, if you can focus on being resilient, that means sometimes you got to go through hard stuff. And even though you may face challenges, the toughest challenge you'll ever face in life is your own self. And if you can get past that, there's nothing on this planet that can stop you. Be resilient, work hard, don't quit, even when you're the thing holding you back, and get comfortable being uncomfortable. If you want to do what I do, you're going to have to learn to step out of your comfort zone. But the beautiful thing about that, you step out of it frequently enough, your comfort zone will grow. But you'll have a habit of knowing how to step out of it safely and how to do that and then get back into it. You've got to be able to do that to work and live in space. Be a lifelong learner, learning in the classroom, but also outside of the classroom. And then the real magic is being able to combine those and take that with you and putting it into practice. Learning for your life. If you want to learn forever, be an astronaut. It's a great place. It's like going to school every day. I want to just drop a public service announcement. Learn a foreign language. If you already know one, learn another one. If you know a bunch, learn the computer program, because math is like a foreign language. And computer program is essentially how these communicate. It's the language of these things. How many of you like money? Kids, how many of you like money, right? It's also the language of money too, right? And if you know that language, you're more likely to keep more of the hard work, the hard-earned money that you will earn over your life. So learn to computer program. That math is super important. I'll talk about that in a minute. And the last thing, be resilient, be a lifelong learner, and finally, be a good teammate. No matter what you want to do in life, you're not going to be able to do it by yourself. Most important things we get to do in life require teamwork. And the challenging part about this third one, though, you're not the one who gets to decide if you're doing a good job. It's the people that you are next to, and those are the folks who get to determine. But that still means it's an important thing for us to strive for, to be a good teammate. Make healthy, rational choices for yourself, and encourage people around you to work hard, but also extend grace to each other. This pandemic has been an interesting time for all of us. And as we start to relax these pandemic restrictions and move back to what normal life was like before, remember etiquette, civility, It's about being kind and thinking about the people on the side of you, about other people. Whether or not we agree is not important. We can all be respectful of one another, and I want to encourage you to do that. With that, I would love to answer some of your questions. Thank you. All right. We've got a microphone floating out there. If you got a question, raise your hand up high, and we will get to it. Yes, sir. Let's, yeah, and I can hear you.
How do you go to the bathroom in space?
Right off the bat, how do we go to the bathroom in space? Most important thing, very carefully. That's pretty much the answer for everything. How do you do anything in space? Very carefully. So take your toilet at home, drain all the water out of it, and then connect your vacuum to it. That's the system, right? But now you've got this really interesting problem that when I'm talking to a new astronaut who hasn't gone to space, we all study rendezvous and docking, how to get a spacecraft connected to another spacecraft. And I talk about alignment, and I talk about contact, separation. And so when you're using the bathroom in space, it's really important to think about alignment, just like we do when we're bringing spacecraft together. And it's really important because you're floating. See, we take so many things for granted when we have gravity. But when you don't have gravity, things want to just kind of go wherever, all right? And so it could become really messy if you're not really careful. But we have that airflow. The vacuum helps to keep things moving one direction. But yes, using the bathroom is very challenging. And it was on the first day, and it was on the last day. I always paid a lot of attention because I didn't want to ever have a mess. And luckily, I never had a really big mess, but it could be. Very carefully. Good question. Sir, we got two here in the front. Oh, and in the back, yes. Okay, hold on. We'll come right back to you.
How do you feel when you come back from space in a long time back to Earth?
How do you feel when you come back from space? So I felt like a 5-year-old toddler. Have you ever seen toddlers walk where they take like 2 steps, they're fine, and then they just fall over? I was strong. We were working out in space, and I felt really strong, but we landed on the water. First nighttime landing since Apollo in 1968. They pulled us out. We're on a boat, and the boat was slightly rocking left and right, and if I didn't have people underneath each arm, I would have fallen over completely. So I was strong, and I could hold my weight up, but I did not have balance. It took me a while to get my coordination back. About 3 or 4 hours before I could walk around by myself, and it actually was about 2 weeks before I was stable enough to drive a car. And then we worked with our trainer, Jim, 2 hours a day, 7 days a week for 45 days, a month and a half. And I waited that long before I flew an airplane again. And so it definitely comes in stages. Good question. We got them all over the place. Where do you want to go? Let's go. I think I saw one over here. In the spacesuit. I like it.
What do you eat in space? What do you eat in space?
The question was, what do you eat
What
in
do you
space?
eat in space? Everything. So we have a few different kinds of food and drink in space. The main thing I think is the rehydratable. We have food that they take the water out of, and so we can put cold water or hot water into things like eggs, oatmeal, green beans, and rehydrate them and eat them. We also have thermostabilized food and irradiated food, where they hit it with a bunch of radiation to kill the germs, and then we can open it and eat it just like it is, or heat it up, or cool it down. And then the irradiated and thermostabilized are both like regular food, a sealed package of chicken breasts or tomato basil soup. And that was one of my favorite things in space, tomato basil soup. And I ate a lot of tomato basil soup because it's healthy, and I was in an experiment to see how we could use vegetables to improve gut health and immune function. But also, tomato basil soup is a great sauce for other things. So I put a lot of tomato basil soup on other foods to try to change them up a little bit, because that is the most important thing about food in space: variety. When you eat the same stuff for 6 months, it can get a little boring if you don't find creative ways to mix it up. Mike, what about you? What did you guys eat? I think our food system is similar, but how was that in shuttle?
No, it was pretty similar. I think what the station, we talked about the different countries, the international. I think we had a lot of international food.
We had lots of. Soichi was everybody's favorite because he brought lots of food and he loved to share. Japanese curry, the rice, lots of seafood, fish. Oh, it was so good. Yeah, and having international partners up there with you, if you can choose. Great question. Great question. We got here in the very front and then back there too. Okay.
How do you survive in space?
Ooh, also very carefully. So we wouldn't survive. Great question. We wouldn't survive up there if we didn't have a whole bunch of things sent up there before we get there, right? There's no air, very little atmosphere, but there's no air. You can't breathe. It can get really hot. It can get really cold. And both of those so extreme that you couldn't survive that. And it's also really, and so to get there, we need spacecraft. And once we get there, we need a space station. On the inside, it's pumped up full of air, kind of like here. We pressurize it to 14 pounds, so it kind of feels like the air down here. We put nitrogen and oxygen inside so that we have air to breathe. It's about 72 degrees, 22 degrees Celsius, like it is here. And then we also, because in weightlessness, when you exhale, your CO2 that you're expiring, that you're breathing out, it's warm and it kind of rises away from your face so that when you inhale, there's good fresh air right there in front of you. In space, less dense air and more dense air, they don't really care. They'll hang out right next to each other because gravity's not pulling one down or letting one rise. So we have to move our air intentionally. And so our air conditioner has to constantly move all the air, and it also takes moisture out of that air. So everything about living in space, living and working in space requires lots of technology. That's a great question. There's lots of things we could talk about with that one, but very carefully. Great question. Let's go back over here. We have that other microphone.
Yeah, try this mic. Yeah.
Have you ever stepped on the moon?
Ooh, have I ever stepped on the moon? No, I haven't. No, I haven't. We haven't sent people to the surface of the moon in a very long time, but we're working on it. We're going to launch here very soon. In the next couple of months, we're going to send a spaceship around the moon. And when that mission is successful, that's going to open the door for us to then send people to orbit the moon, which is then going to allow us to send people back to the surface of the moon. I haven't stepped foot on it, but I have touched a piece of it with my finger, which is very cool. Come to Johnson Space Center and visit, and you could touch a piece of the moon too at our Space Center. Very good question. Let's see. Actually, I think you've been raising your hand for quite a while too. Very nice hat, by the way.
So when you're doing Operation Iraqi Freedom, what carrier were you on in the Atlantic?
What carrier?
Yeah.
I was on the USS John F. Kennedy. That was actually the last deployment of John F. Kennedy.
Wait. Yeah. Okay.
Very good question. I could talk about flying all day. Yes, sir. You have a question?
Buddy. There you go.
I never went to space.
I'm sorry. Say it one more time.
I never went to space.
You've never been to space.
You've never been to space?
Not
But
yet.
do you want to go to space?
Yes.
Yes? Anybody else want to go to space? Who wants to go to space? I think you should. I think you should. You remember that list of stuff up there? You work on that stuff, and I think you will have a good shot at going to space. Let's see. Is yours working as well here in the front?
How does it feel to sleep in space?
Ooh, good question. And I love your sweatshirt. How does it feel to sleep in space? Sleeping in space to me feels like sleeping on Earth. Once you're asleep, it's very comfortable. It's the falling asleep part that's hard. So you don't have the same like sensations, the proprioceptive cues they call it. When you sleep on Earth, you lie down. Gravity is now moving sideways. It's usually a little cooler. You make it dark. Well, in space, we're orbiting the Earth going, I didn't talk about how fast we have to go to get to orbit. We're going 17,500 miles an hour. That speed is special because the reason things float is because everything is falling. We're falling, but we're moving across the ground so fast, We're just missing the ground. The ground is curving away from us as we're falling. So everything floats. And when you're floating in space, there's no way to lie down. So we have sleeping bags that we can tie to the wall in our crew quarters. That's our little room. It's like a phone booth. Wait, none of you know what a phone booth is. It's just a big box that we get in. So some folks would try to zip it up and tie it really tight to give them the sensation that they're lying down. I just let mine float. And so your body kind of wants to take this position, almost like you're riding a horse. This is the position your body will naturally weightless and relaxed. And so I slept in this position. And one interesting thing about it, I slept very comfortably in space, but I only need 7 hours in space. I don't know why. Your body, maybe it's working less, not as hard because you're unloaded. Like at a cellular level, your body is unloaded completely. I stretched out. I was actually 6 feet tall while I was in space, but I only needed 7 hours. So I slept very well, but sleeping in space can be challenging because of those differences in sensation. Good question. Right here in the front. Yes, sir.
Okay, this is going to be our last one.
Last question. Yep. Okay. No pressure. Make it a good one.
What was it like taking off in an F-18 off of Caviar?
What was it like taking off of an aircraft carrier in an F-18? Oh, wow. Launching in a rocket takes the cake is one of the most dynamic things I've ever done. But in the moment, like those few seconds when a catapult lets you go is still one of the most dynamic things I've ever done. In a couple of seconds, you go from sitting completely still on the front of a carrier. The catapult is actually holding you back. There's a piece that pulls backwards and a piece that pulls forward. We call that going into tension. And your nose wheel drops down. And then they tell you to push your power up. And sometimes you can go afterburner. And we'll put the power all the way up, check all the controls and the displays, make sure everything is good. And then there's a person with a yellow vest on looking at you, waiting. And then, well, actually, he salutes you, then waits, or she salutes you. And when I salute he or she back, then I hold, and they do this. Have you ever seen that in movies? And they give them the signal to launch. And I mean, it is just, you go from 0 to boom, over 100 knots in less than 200 feet in about a second, and you're flying off the front of a carrier. And it is amazing. It is one of the most amazing things I've ever done. At night, when you go off the front of the ship, it's completely black in front of you until your eyes adjust. So it can also be one of the most pulse quickening things that I've ever done too. Very exciting though. I love it and I miss it. It's great to be on a carrier. I miss that. Thank you for the questions. I could do this all day. Thanks for sharing some time with me and letting me share this with you. Thank you.
Absolutely amazing. All right. And thank you so much again for being here during Kids Week. It's such an amazing opportunity and such a cool connection too that you actually got to fly off of aircraft carriers.
I love it. Yes.
Kind of like ours, but
Yeah.
a little more modern. Thanks so much again.
Thank you.
That was
My
amazing,
pleasure.
wasn't it? One more round of applause for our astronaut, Victor J. Glover Jr. Thank you. All right. So everyone, it might not be the same as space, but did you know you can actually spend the night here at the Intrepid Museum? Does that sound fun? I think it sounds pretty fun, right? Look at all the cool things we have here. Amazing. So that's actually something called Operation Slumber. We do offer that, and it allows you to discover what life is like here on board the Intrepid in a really fun and really adventurous way. We've got hands-on activities. We've got tours of the ship. Lots of fun talks with our educators. So check out our website, intrepidmuseum.org/groups, if you're interested in that opportunity and for more information. Also, everyone, don't forget to head over to our Maker Zone right over here with our education team. You are going to get to make your own Mars rover before heading upstairs to the Space Shuttle Pavilion and seeing a full-size model of the real thing, as well as its cute little friend, the Ingenuity helicopter. But everyone, stick around, please, because coming back up here at 3 o'clock, we are going to be welcoming our astronaut friend, Victor J. Glover Jr., right back onto this stage for another presentation. So we'll see you then. Have a great Kids Week, guys.